Hey, hello, welcome everybody. My name is Kevin. I'm the training coordinator here with the Association of State Floodplain Managers. I'd like to welcome you to our first CTP webinar of the year. This is our quarterly webinar series, and today we're going to be discussing future conditions flood mapping. We're going to be giving kind of an update for 2025 here today. But before we get into that topic and all that goes along with that, I just want to set the table with a little bit of logistics to let everyone know kind of how the presentation is going to work today. Number one, we're recording this just so everyone knows kind of as a backstop. If we move too fast or you miss something, maybe you want to reference it later, we do have that recording and we'll make that available. So just want to let everybody know there. Next thing, we've got a really sizable audience today, so all lines are obviously muted. So we do want your participation. We're not going to be able to unmute lines for an audio dialogue, but we do want you to participate. And to that end, if you could locate the Q&A feature here within the Zoom software, that's where we'd like you to put your questions and comments about anything you might see today. You may also see a chat area. The chat, we're going to try to stay on top of the chat area as well. It gets a little bit more challenging to keep track of with an audience of this size. So if you'd like a question addressed, please find the Q&A area and put it in Q&A. Otherwise, we may not be able to answer it. But that's going to be how you're going to participate today. We'll also have a poll question or two as well. So those will prompt you at that time when it's time to do the polls. So just a note on continuing education. This training is obviously eligible for continuing education. For floodplain managers and also planners. If you're a national level CFM who earns credit today, we're going to apply that to your records automatically. And if you're an AICP, we'll send you the lookup number with a follow-up email that'll let you get credit for that as well. Couple, additional logistics. We're going to send out certificates of attendance, kind of related to credits, but you'll get a certificate of attendance for those of you that participate today. That takes a week or sometimes two, but we'll email that directly to your inbox. It'll contain the certificate, any other promised follow-up that we may have indicated on the training today. That'll all come kind of directly to your inbox there. So other than that, I just want to turn it over to Alan Luloff. Alan is senior member of our ASFPM Flood Science Center, and he's going to be telling us a little bit more about this CTP subcommittee, this webinar series, our topic, and the presenters we have. So Alan, take it away, please.
Good. Hello. Yes, my name is Alan Luloff. I'm with the ASFPM Flood Science Center. And this is a webinar that's put on actually by the subcommittee of our ASFPM Mapping and Engineering Standards Committee. And the co-chairs of this subcommittee are Joanna Rolfe with the state of Kansas and Dave Gannett with the state of Maryland. And you can see the major goals of this effort. ASFPM is very supportive of the FEMA's Cooperating Technical Partners Program. Our board of directors has passed a resolution about 5 years ago that really emphasized our support for this effort, and that's when this subcommittee was formed. So today we are talking about kind of future conditions, and we're emphasizing kind of hydrology and in the mapping program, because hydrology is kind of the area that has some of the largest uncertainty in the mapping effort. And one of the first steps in our process today is we're going to be talking about the FEMA Technical Mapping Advisory Council and their recommendations related to future conditions. And then NOAA is presenting on their Atlas 15 pilot effort that they recently completed. And then NOAA is also going to be talking about their probable maximum participation. And the speakers today are going to be Jeff Sparrow, and he's a senior vice president with Moffitt and Nickel. He's got 35 years experience in flood risk reduction. He serves on FEMA's Technical Mapping Advisory Council and is certainly a member of his relationship to the council now is is associated with a floodplain management association, and he's also past chair of the Technical Mapping Advisory Council. And then we have Doug Balamo, who he's a professional engineer with 30 years of experience. He's currently with AECOM, but he also worked as a senior technical advisor for flood risk management at the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and where I've known Doug mostly as the director of the FEMA Emergency Risk Analysis Division. We worked for many, many years. And then we have Dr. Kelly Mahoney. She's a research meteorologist with 15 years experience studying extreme precipitation with NOAA's Physical Sciences Laboratory in Boulder, Colorado. Her work focuses on flood risk as well as prediction and projections of extremes in our changing climate. And then we have Sandra Pavlovic. She's a professional water resources engineer with 20 years of experience. You look at all the levels of experience you have with speakers today, it's exceptional. And experience in civil and environmental engineering in both private and public sector. At present, she holds a position at the National Weather Service as the program lead of the Hydrometeorological, that's a nice word, Design Study Center, responsible for revising and releasing the NOAA Precipitation Frequency Standard. So those are our speakers today. And with that, I think it will start with Jeff Sparrow.
Thank you, Alan. Let me get to the slideshow here.
Looks good, Jeff.
Great. Thank you, Kevin. Alan, thanks for those introductions. As Alan said, Doug and I are here. Doug with AECOM, I'm with Moffett and Nickel. We're going to be presenting on recommendations of the Technical Mapping Advisory Council. Probably need to put the disclaimer up front here. What we say today are Doug and my views. We're not representing FEMA, and we're not representing necessarily the Technical Mapping Advisory Council either. So folks may not be familiar with TMAC. TMAC is the Technical Mapping Advisory Council. It was founded in 2020 by Congress as part of the Bigger Waters Flood Insurance Reform Act of 2012. I said 2020, excuse me, 2012, with the purpose of providing recommendations to FEMA on the NFIP mapping program. There are 20 members that are outlined in the legislation that make up the council, 6 from federal agencies, 7 state and local, and 7 from associations or organizations. As the topic here today is on future conditions, TMAC did issue a report in 2015 that was focused on future conditions, and then those recommendations were updated in 2021. If you're interested in viewing that report or any of the TMAC reports, you can view them on the FEMA website. We've included the link here, or the website address. Usually what I find the easiest way to find it is if you just Google FEMA TMAC reports, it'll usually be the first return that you'll see in the search engine to take a look at. Today's presentation, though, we're going to focus on recommendations that TMAC made in 2023 based on FEMA's request. And FEMA requested TMAC to focus on 4 topic areas in 2023. But today we're going to focus on the first one, which is more related to the future conditions topic for today's webinar. And the first topic was recommend if and how FEMA should modify the definition of the special flood hazard area, modify how the special flood area is currently calculated without redefining it. So again, here's the topic, a little bit bigger text for you to be able to read. And we made 5 recommendations regarding this topic, and they're the 5 recommendations that Doug and I will review today. The first recommendation we had was to divide the current special flood hazard area into 2 pieces, one for mandatory purchase and the other for floodplain management. And the specific recommendation was FEMA should develop 2 new flood hazard areas, a new special flood hazard area to be used for determining mandatory purchase requirements more confidently based on existing land use conditions. And the second was new flood prone areas to be used for floodplain management requirements based on future conditions. So we'll go into a little more detail around these 2 flood zones next to take a look at that. So first, as we look at the special flood hazard area, and we called it a new special flood hazard area for mandatory purchase, because we look at it as if one of the objectives is to have, for those in the 100-year floodplain to be covered by insurance, we should use a more confident value. The current special flood hazard area is based on the median value. And what TMAC recommended was that FEMA should develop the special flood hazard area based on existing 1% annual chance flood at the 95% confidence limit, not the median or 50% confidence limit as currently done. So the thought being here, one of the concepts behind it is we all frequently hear after a large flood occurs is the number of structures that were flooded that were not in the map special flood hazard area. And, part of that can be is where we are mapping the special flood hazard area at the 50% confidence limit or the median. So by definition, 50% of the properties could be shown outside the special flood hazard area. So by increasing the confidence limit that we map the special flood hazard area at, we should be able to capture the majority of the structures that would be within the 1% annual chance floodplain, and also then have that mandatory purchase requirement for insurance purposes. Next, I'll turn over to Doug to discuss the remaining recommendations.
Great, thanks, Jeff. So I have 3 slides building on what Jeff just described. I'll talk a little bit about what we're calling the flood-prone area, and then do the best I can to make it very clear this is distinct from the new special flood hazard area that Jeff just described. And this new flood-prone area, if you will, would be something that would be used for floodplain management, and it would be based on estimates of future condition, 1% annual chance exceedance flood. And then I'm going to touch on a couple of recommendations, one oriented around the 500-year floodplain, and another recommendation regarding the importance of working really closely with stakeholders should FEMA choose to implement any of these recommendations. Particularly working with folks prior to any of these, recommendations or whatever proposed changes FEMA develops, working with them prior to implementing these pretty significant and sweeping changes. So on this slide here, what you'll see is I would describe it as a rather crude formula to estimate a future conditions 1% annual chance exceedance flood. The recommendation specifically here is that FEMA should require new flood-prone areas used for floodplain management to be based on a 1% annual chance future condition estimate of the hazard at the 95% confidence limits. And so I'll start with this equation up here, which says start with the existing 95% confidence limit. So this you can think of as what Jeff just described as the new special flood hazard area. So this is an existing condition, 95% confidence level, 1% annual chance exceedance probability. I know I'm on the phone with professionals, so you guys are probably tracking that. So think of that as an existing condition. And then to estimate the future floodplain, if you will, add to that the allowable rise or the surcharge. So one really glaring issue the TMAC identified was that the program is structured in a way that communities adopt minimum floodplain management ordinances, and then they're allowed to encroach within the floodplain, essentially reducing the hydraulic capacity of the river or the flooding source to the point where it rises by a certain level. And that level varies from community to community, even state to state. But by allowing those encroachments, you're in effect saying in the future, the flood elevation will be this existing condition plus some increase due to the fact that these hydraulic constrictions are allowed. So that's the second part of the equation. And then the third is other planned and possible increases. And this would include things like in coastal areas, it would include projections of sea level rise, in riverine situations, and our NOAA folks here will talk a little bit about this, potential increases in rainfall intensity or flows during the 100-year flood. But it would also include human decisions like increased impervious surface outside the floodplain, and other factors that might cause the flood elevation to rise in the future. So that's a quick description of this particular recommendation and a high-level view of the elements that would make up a future condition floodplain. Now, next slide. So these are the other two recommendations I said I'd chat about. The first one is developing to develop a 500-year or 0.2% annual chance flood estimate for existing conditions at the 95% confidence limit, and then to evaluate the need to develop a future condition 0.2% annual chance flood estimate. So the idea here is come up with an existing condition 500-year floodplain that matches the confidence level of the existing condition 100-year floodplain, that new SFHA that Jeff described, and then contemplate whether or not an estimate of a future condition 500-year floodplain would be needed for the program based on the objectives that the NFIP is trying to accomplish. There was a lot of debate and deliberation around this. In order to prevent confusion, as you might imagine, if you had a future conditions 500-year floodplain, and you were looking at that compared to your flood-prone area, which would be a future conditions 100-year, you'd want to have some sort of consistency there. And so making sure that those technical specifications for identifying any kind of future condition 500-year would really need to be tightly coupled with the flood-prone area. The second here, AR, which stands for Annual Recommendation Number 52, talks about the importance of FEMA not making these proposed changes should they choose to adopt them in a really quick and sweeping manner, but to work with stakeholders regarding when and how the changes would be put into effect, specifics around the technical requirements, what really would go into estimating this future condition flood-prone area, and what would go into establishing confidence limits against the existing condition hazards as well. So the TMAC really thought it was important to call out a specific recommendation on establishing standards and identifying when these changes may take effect should FEMA decide to move forward with them. Just got one more slide. Just want to emphasize that, and you'll see this in the executive summary of the report if you open and read it, that the TMAC really did feel this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to put the nation on a better path toward flood resilience. The current structure of the program, not necessarily recognizing within the building codes and elevation requirements that a surcharge would eventually put folks a foot below. That issue itself was a big driver toward these recommendations, but also the need and the existing science to come up with a future condition so that when you are making land use decisions, when you are making building code decisions, you have that future conditions information in hand to really inform those decisions and avoid as much future flood loss as possible. Again, these are recommendations. FEMA is going to have to decide if, when, or how to implement them. We also, the Technical Mapping Advisory Council, recognized at the time the report was developed that these changes are not small, and it's going to take a significant amount of effort and time to develop and implement them should FEMA decide to do that. And so, again, the reason for this really important recommendation around stakeholder engagement. And then if you want to see some implementation ideas that the TMAC had, more details on these recommendations, including the other 3 topic areas we didn't touch on today. Just like Jeff said, if you put in your search engine FEMA TMAC reports, you can read the 2023 report and the 2015 report, as well as that was on future conditions, as well as other reports. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sandra with NOAA.
Great, thank you, Doug. So while Sandra's getting set up, I just want to remind everybody, if you have questions, locate the Q&A area in the Zoom software here and drop them in there. Thanks.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Sandra Pavlik, and I'm a hydrologist within NOAA, National Weather Service, Office of Water Prediction. And first, I would like to express my gratitude to the ASVPM team and community for inviting us to give a follow-up presentation on NOAA Atlas 15 and presentation on recently released pilot dataset and website. So just a bit of a background. Today, I plan to briefly summarize the history of precipitation frequency standards and provide updates on NOAA Atlas 14, which is our current national standard. And then I'll discuss the development of NOAA Atlas 15 and cover recently released pilot study. Additionally, I will briefly touch on some of the engagement. To provide historical context, NOAA has long been the trusted source for precipitation frequency data, which has been integrated into federal, state, and local standards for planning and designing civil engineering infrastructure. The dataset, this dataset is nearly a century old, with the first federal publication by the USDA dating back to 1935. In the 1950s, the responsibility for developing and updating precipitation frequency estimates shifted to NOAA, since NOAA as an organization does not own, regulate, or design any type of civil engineering infrastructure. Over the years, NOAA published estimates through various technical papers, documents, and atlases, and the methodology used for those publications have improved over time, reflecting advancements in scientific knowledge and data availability. For instance, here on the slide, I'm showing a map of from technical paper 40, which was published in 1960s. And this study presents isohedral maps for various durations and exceedance probabilities. And practitioners were required to interpolate estimates between isohedrals to obtain values for specific location. However, this study later on was recognized for not accounting for orographic effects in extreme precipitation, posing a gap in areas with complex terrain. And a decade later, NOAA released the Atlas 2 study only for the western part of the United States to address terrain and orographic influences in its estimates. There are several additional studies after NOAA Atlas 2, but most notable one is NOAA Atlas 14, and all of those further advance the development of the standard. NOAA Atlas 14 estimates, the first volume was published in early 2000, and for the first time produced estimates at the 1 kilometer resolution, eliminating the need for interpolation from isohedrals, and then for the first time also provided 95 and 5% confidence intervals to reflect the uncertainty associated with this data set. Unfortunately, the funding for NOAA Atlas 14 is coming from states and other users on a cost reimbursable basis, leading to the boundary issues between different volumes. Currently, thanks to the support from the bipartisan infrastructure law, NOAA has received the federal funding for the first time to address two significant gaps in NOAA Atlas 14. One is to develop the seamless national analysis to eliminate the boundary issues caused by the no-atlas funding model, and then to update the assumption of stationary climate to a non-stationary climate. And when we discuss this, we discuss more in a statistical context. Just a brief background on NOAA Atlas 14 current standard. For the past 20 years, NOAA has updated NOAA Atlas 14 estimates through volumes of NOAA Atlas 14. First study was published in 2024, but I wanted to just bring to your attention that on September 19, 2024, so just a few months back, we published the NOAA Atlas 14 Volume 12 study for the states of Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming. And as you can see on the map, we completed the development of almost all states except Oregon and Washington. That said, we continue to receive funding from states to work on these studies, and we're currently working on Volume 13, which actually impacts the area, covers the area impacted by Hurricane Helene. And so when we publish this study, we will replace the estimates from NOAA Atlas 14 Volume 2, mostly that is already 20 years old. Okay, so NOAA Atlas 15, we're currently developing the next version of precipitation frequency standard. It's called NOAA Atlas 15. And when published, NOAA Atlas 15 will cover storm durations from 5 minutes to 60 days and exceedance probabilities up to 1%, matching the duration and exceedance probabilities we have in NOAA Atlas 14. This data set is presented in 2 volumes. Volume 1 estimates are based on historical observations and will account for historical trend from observed data through non-stationary statistical analysis. When completed, these estimates will supersede estimates from the regional NOAA Atlas 14 studies. Volume 2 estimates are developed by applying adjustment factors to the Volume 1 estimates, and those adjustment factors are as of future relative changes obtained from downscale climate model data. Furthermore, Volume 2 data are presented for future time periods as part of 2 distinct frameworks. One is global warming framework, and the other one is emission scenario framework. For the scenario framework, we offer 2 scenarios per decade up to 2100. For global warming framework, we provide estimates for global mean temperature above pre-industrial period for a range between 1.5 and 5 degrees Celsius on 0.5 increments. So here in the slide, I'm showing the NOAA Atlas 15 roadmap. Today, I will share an update from the NOAA Atlas 15 pilot, which was released on September 26, 2024. After the pilot, we plan to release preliminary estimates for CONUS in 2025 and begin the peer review process, and then use that feedback to incorporate into the final estimates over CONUS in 2026. Also in 2026, we plan to release preliminary NOAA Atlas 15 estimates for all CONUS regions, and then begin the peer review process, and then address that feedback and implement, finalize the estimates over all CONUS in 2027. So we know Atlas 15 dataset, all NOAA precip frequency standard and all atlases, they go under public review process. And with the Atlas 15, we're looking to follow the process that we have for NOAA Atlas 14, where we collect the feedback and then publish the feedback anonymously along with our responses as part of our documentation. I just want to mention that the feedback that we received through the public review process is really a critical step in both the development process and adaptation efforts, and really provides opportunity for the local knowledge and expertise to be included in the federally derived data set. With Atlas 15, we have added additional engagement and coordinations with our partners and stakeholders to gather early feedback and buy-in and help our communities get the information they need upon publication. And the publication of NOAA Atlas 15 pilot is one of those engagements, and I'll discuss that. I just wanted to also bring to your attention that over the past 2 years, we supported engagements effort with our stakeholders and regularly met with American Society of Civil Engineers, Association of State Floodplain Managers, and other associations. And we also hosted 2 technical workshops for federal partners. We had attendees from 10 different federal agencies who provided feedback during 2 workshops, one that was held on January 18, 2023, and the other one that was held on August 14, 2024. The second workshop, we presented the data and website in preparation for the pilot release and demonstrated how some of the comments from the first workshop were integrated into Atlas 15 development. We also published 2 notification statements and are currently collecting feedback on the one released along with the pilot data. So what is the NOAA Atlas 15 pilot? NOAA Atlas 15 pilot provides initial look at the structure of the NOAA Atlas 15 dataset over state of Montana. And the intent is to collect early feedback on development framework and web dissemination strategies. We often get the question, why Montana? Well, Montana was selected due to its diverse terrain characteristics, but also due to availability of quality control data that was recently used to publish NOAA Atlas 14 volume 12, which then allowed us opportunity to compare the current estimates based on the new methodology with the precip frequency estimates produced by the legacy stationary approach. And those comparisons are included in the NOAA Atlas 15 documentation that I'm here referencing on the slide. Pilot data, methods, and website will be refined through 2026 and 2027 when NOAA Atlas 15 will be published. I also wanted to point out that for the pilot data, we're providing estimates that cover a subset of storm durations and probabilities from 1 hour to 10 days and up to 1% of annual exceedance probabilities. But for the final release, we will have a range of durations and exceedance probabilities that are available currently in NOAA Atlas 14. So what information and visualization is currently available to public? The pilot data are available for review through the National Weather Service Gateway to all water information at water.noaa.gov/about/Atlas 15. I have included a QR code here on the slide that will take you to the Atlas 15 informational page. And at the top of the page, there is a yellow box that provides, at the top of the page, offers quick links to the pilot data visualization page that you can see to the right that I'll demo on the next slide, a scientific report describing the data and methodology used, a quick start video on navigating the Atlas 15 pilot pages, and a survey for providing feedback on the pilot data and web dissemination strategy. The informational page further provides responses to the frequently asked questions and also provides direction on how to sign up for our email list. And I think that is probably the last question on the page. Okay, so with this slide, I'll demonstrate the pilot website in 6 minutes by playing a pre-recorded video. Usually when we play a recorded video of a Zoom, it usually maybe there is a 20% sound is maybe 20% quieter than what I speak. So if you have a hard time hearing, please increase the volume on your computer. I also wanted to mention that this video is available on our website via OWP YouTube channel, so you can refer back to it whenever it's needed.
Welcome to the NOAA Atlas 15 pilot webpage. This pilot study offers a first look at the structure of the NOAA Atlas 15 dataset over the state of Montana in order to collect early feedback on the data and web dissemination strategies. NOAA Atlas 15 will continue to be refined through 2026 and 2027, when estimates will be officially published. The release of NOAA Atlas 15 pilot data is intended for comparison and feedback purposes only, as it has not yet completed the peer review process. Detailed information on the development of NOAA Atlas 15 can be found on this page. To access the pilot webpage, please click here. The NOAA Atlas 15 pilot covers a subset of storm durations of 1 hour to 10 days and average annual exceedance probabilities of 50% to 1%, and is presented as 2 volumes. Volume 1 estimates are based on historical observations and provide estimates for the year 2023. Volume 2 estimates are developed by applying adjustment factors to the 2023 Volume 1 estimates and are presented for future time periods as part of 2 distinct frameworks: global warming level and emissions scenario. Under the title, you will see 2 maps. The left is a map of Volume 1, and the right is a map of Volume 2. Displayed on the map are the gridded estimates that can be selected below the maps. Users can change the base map to topography, satellite, dark or light modes. Opacity can be varied in order to see more of the base map through the estimates. For the pilot study, the time series default is the annual maximum series. Precipitation type defaults to depth, but intensity can also be chosen. The default units are in English, inches, but metric units in millimeters can also be selected. Both maps currently default to 50% annual exceedance probability and 60-minute duration. Users can change these options and both maps will update accordingly. Both maps are in sync and will zoom into the same location simultaneously. Users can zoom in and out of the location by using the plus, minus, and home buttons at the top right corner of the left map, or by using the cursor and pressing Control and using the mouse wheel to zoom in and out. Double-clicking the mouse button will target a new location and update the output of the table and chart below. The location search under the left map can also be used to type in a specific address, town or city, or latitude-longitude in decimal degrees, with a comma separating the latitude, which comes first, from the longitude as seen in this example. Also, above the Volume 1 map, on the right side is an option to select Show Stations, where stations used in the development of the precipitation frequency estimates can be displayed on the map. For the Volume 2 map on the right side, users can select whether they want to choose a scenario or global warming level by using the menus above the map. The default option is global warming level and 3 degrees Celsius. Global warming levels can be selected from 1.5 degrees through 5 degrees Celsius. When selecting the scenario option, a new tab will appear where you can select SSP 245 or SSP 585, and then the year can be selected decadally from 2030 through 2100. Below the map on the right side, you will find the precipitation frequency estimates for the selected duration specified above and for the subset of annual exceedance probabilities. For the pilot study, only the 90% confidence interval is available. An additional projection from the Volume 2 estimates within the selected framework has been added to the table as the last column on the right with the title text in purple. This additional projection will also be displayed in purple on the chart on the left. Below the map on the left-hand side is a chart of precipitation depth versus annual exceedance probability for the duration selected above. The green line represents the Volume 1 estimates, and the shaded area indicates the 90% confidence bounds. The blue line represents the selections chosen for the Volume 2 map, the default being global warming level 3 degrees Celsius. The purple line is the additional projection. Users also have the ability to toggle on and off the lines and confidence intervals on the chart using the legend. Just above the chart are tabs where the users can access other useful information. The Table tab provides estimates in tabular form. In the future, users will be able to toggle specific durations and annual exceedance probabilities for download. We would like your feedback on what format you would like to see the data provided. Clicking on the Compare button will bring up a pop-up window that has full tabular data for Volume 1, as well as selected global warming level or scenario selected for Volume 2. The global warming level or scenario can be changed in the pop-up window using the drop-down menu. For all feedback, please see the link "Click here" to provide feedback at the top of the page under the title. This will bring you to the feedback form. Users can go back to the NOAA Atlas 15 informational page by clicking on the link found here. There is also a link to the documentation found here. Thank you for your participation. We value your feedback and look forward to hearing from you.
So that was the demo for the website. I just want to also bring up that on the website, we have NOAA Atlas 15 pilot technical report. And this technical report provides detailed information on the data used to inform the development of Volume 1 and Volume 2 estimates. It outlines the federal, state, local gauge networks utilized to development on Volume 1 data and identifies downscale data sets that inform the development of the Volume 2 data. Additionally, the report describes the non-stationary statistical method based on the maximum likelihood approach that was applied to both Volume 1 and Volume 2. And it further explains the regionalization, interpolation technique used for development of this data, and also details how adjustment factors were calculated within a two distinct framework for Volume 2 estimates. And finally, it provides a comparison between stationary and non-stationary estimates using Atlas 15 methodology, and also provides comparison to the Atlas 14 estimates. So if I would like you to have a takeaway of my presentation today, this slide will probably be that we are looking currently, we're seeking user input to understand how NOAA could involve its existing approach with the pilot data to deliver and disseminate information nationwide so that the practitioners like you have the information they need upon publication. We generally value input, how we can enhance this approach, and we ask this community to share and provide feedback on the pilot data and our website. Here on the slide, I also added a QR code that you can use now that will take you directly to our feedback form. Generally urge everyone to provide the feedback today, but if not, the feedback and website will be available by the end of January, when is our deadline for the feedback public review process. I'm also listing an email address where you can submit any questions. And I just wanted to say that any type of feedback is welcome, from what type of format do you need to download the data to use for your application, to improvement of the web functionalities, are we missing some information, what information will be useful to you, how do we present it, to how you can use or not use this information. And I want to point out here on the slide, there's a question 7, which it's an open-ended question. So please provide feedback. Also, if you need to reference any journal publications, I think that will be all good. I also wanted to say that survey responses are the most effective way for us to gather and evaluate feedback consistently and to follow the process that we currently have in Atlas 14. I also wanted to mention that in a partnership with the National Center for Environmental Information, we are engaging regional stakeholders who utilize Atlas 14 and will utilize Atlas 15 data. The NCI team will host a workshop on February 25, 2025 in Missoula, Montana. It's a whole day workshop. So if you have any interest in participating, please email us at atlasinfo atlas15.info@noaa.gov, and we will share your contact information with the team. And before I conclude my presentation, I want to thank and acknowledge the technical team behind the development of Atlas 1415 datasets. Our technical team is a diverse group of experts working under contracts and grants. We have a team under the IBSS RTI LAGO contract. We also have a CAIRO grant that supports this contract by evolving statistical methodology and evaluating processing climate model outputs for future IBFs. So that is all I have for today. I just wanted to thank you all and for listening and providing feedback. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to submit them to the atlas15.info@noaa.gov email address. And with this, I'll pass presentation to Kelly Mahoney.
All right, thanks, Sandra. I'm getting pulled up here. Let's see. And let me know if my slide looks okay on your end.
Yeah, it looks good, Kelly.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. All right, well, thank you, Sandra, for setting up the, what is in a lot of ways the shining star of NOAA finally being able to modernize, very comprehensively its extreme precipitation guidance. I'm going to be talking about what I kind of refer to as like a sister project. It's like a little bit further behind project, but this is on probable maximum precipitation, and we'll go into what that is and how it's different from what you've just heard about in a moment. But you can kind of also broadly think about this part of the presentation being about extreme precipitation and extreme events that go beyond that sort of 1 in 1,000 year annual exceedance probability. So let's just get into it. So I've been fortunate to have the opportunity to address this community in the past on probable maximum precipitation, but I feel like it's one of those topics that if you don't work with it regularly, it can be a little bit like of a niche thing. So just to start off with the simple definition, PMP is defined as the maximum depth of precipitation over a given area and duration that we consider to be meteorologically possible. So it's a deterministic number, and you can kind of think of it as a conceptual upper bound that meteorologists and engineers over decades have determined to be what the atmosphere could squeeze out in the way of precipitation, a maximum upper thing that you never want to exceed. And so it's used for high hazard infrastructure such as high hazard dams and nuclear facilities, and it's been known for a long time that it's very, very outdated. So we've seen that really come front and center this year, but also in past years as well. But these were just easy grabs from Hurricanes Helene and Milton. Right, the month before that, it was the Carolinas. Right, the month before that, it was Vermont. But we've seen these events bring our high hazard infrastructure to its breaking point. So it's a very timely moment for NOAA to also be able to undertake updating its extreme precipitation guidance for these higher end extremes. I want to be really clear about how PMP relates to precipitation frequency. And so there's a table with details here, but broadly speaking, in terms of its application, again, PMP has been traditionally used for high hazard dams. So dams that if they failed, they would cause fatalities is an easy way to think of it. And then nuclear infrastructure versus engineering and water infrastructure that is built to an acceptable risk level. So not that you want these things to fail, but it's a difference of fatalities and things that cannot fail versus these sort of differential AEP risk levels. And you can kind of start thinking about this in terms of your own work, we're going to come to a poll question. I think I'll leave it till the end at this point, but a poll question about your own work and what happens beyond a 1 in 1,000 year risk type of event for you, your agency, your current work, and also where you see it going in the future. So just like Sandra mentioned for the Atlas 15 upgrades, we also got bipartisan infrastructure law support for PMP modernization. But different from the Atlas 14 crew at the Office of Water Prediction within NOAA, NOAA research was a little, not behind, but we knew that we didn't know how we wanted to take on PMP modernization. We knew we didn't want to do it only from an atmospheric science research silo perspective. And so the first thing that we did with our support, with our federal support, was to commission a study done by the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine, sort of the gold standard for peer review. And what we asked the national committees to do was to convene a committee of experts to consider approaches for estimating PMP in a changing climate. And we asked them to provide an updated approach, which would be appropriate for decision maker needs. So again, really trying to consider the state of the science and what is possible, but also what is possible to be used by partners and stakeholders. And we want this to be able to serve as a national standard, so less of the regional compartmentalization of different rules and regulations and guidance data sets. That's sort of the vision. So the National Academy study on PMP started about just over 2 years ago, and we got the report released over the summer. The report was written by a committee of 12 really world-renowned experts in fields ranging from hydrology to meteorology to statistics to people with plenty of decades worth of practitioner experience in using this information. And it was done very inclusively, gathering information across sectors and across disciplines. The report is now publicly available. If you aren't familiar with it at all and you haven't checked it out, I would encourage you to do so, because it is not just about the one quantity of PMP. There's a lot in there about broader extreme precipitation applications and areas for improvement going forward. So I speak very highly of the report, which, as a sponsor, I was not involved with. And I just found out this morning that it was in the top 15 most downloaded reports in 2024 by the National Academies. And I wasn't really sure how amazing that was. And so I went and looked at the other ones, and we're the only, this study was the only what I would call a technical physical science report. The other ones were on everything from cannabis to AI in society and things. So I think it speaks volumes. It's something that, again, I called at the beginning, like PMP is sometimes this niche, small detail to certain people. I think more broadly, this take on extreme precipitation and infrastructure relevance is increasingly relevant to a lot of people with a broader reach than ever. So with that being said, what did the report say? This is kind of where we are. So we just got this about 6 months ago. And again, the report is full. It's full of history. It's full of critical thinking about how they come to their recommendations. And so I encourage you to check it out. And for the purpose of this presentation, I'm going to just show you the main summary figure that they tried to put a lot of their recommendations into. And it's this flow chart, which I know it's a lot of boxes and a lot of arrows, but I think you can kind of blur your eyes, and on the left-hand side in yellow, all of those recommendations and sort of timeline paint the picture of the need for near-term enhancements over a shorter timeline, say now through the next 5 years. And then on the right-hand side of the figure in green is this view of where we really want to get to, where the science tells us we should be. And that's going to take some time. So those are called the long-term recommendations. And underpinning all of this is actually a new definition of PMP completely. So that's part of why I said, even if you've never dealt with PMP in your past world, you may deal with flavors of it going forward. And then the other thing that I appreciate that the National Academies called out was also the fact that in order to do this right, we all really want to adhere to core values of transparency, objectivity, accessibility, and reproducibility. And some of that speaks very clearly to the relationships that we have with our practitioners and stakeholder community. A lot of it also is the best science, right? It needs to be objective, it needs to be reproducible. And so I think, again, these core values are called out very clearly in the report, and we champion them going forward as well. Okay, so when the National Academies in general puts out a report, it's not a directive, it's not an implementation plan. It's a good bit of detail, but it's not down to every last detail. And so it's a roadmap. It's one way you could get there. And so that's kind of where we are right now. We're at the beginning of this roadmap, and it's an incredibly useful one. But there's a lot of space in between what we're looking at right now and how we get to that end result. And so again, I appreciate the opportunity to give this update. I can't believe it was about 2 years ago where I was just telling you, like, oh, we're going to modernize PMP and we're going to do this study. And now I can say what we're actually doing with it. A lot of it is still in sort of the transition mode between the study phase and the implementation phase, but I want to at least show you a couple of things today that point to what we're actually working on. And one of those is kind of holding the tension between granular research topics that we're really going to be pushing forward, but also recognizing that a lot of the essence of this new definition and everything really shifts the whole paradigm of how people have seen and used PMP before. And so we're kind of doing these things in parallel, trying to wrap our minds around that shift while we make discernible progress forward with our science. And I'll get into kind of the rest of these, the breakdown between how we're treating long-term recommendations and short-term recommendations and so on. Okay, so I've said this a couple of times now. The National Academy study recommended a new PMP definition, and I have it listed here. And the first couple of sentences just say we should work with people. We should work with all of our relevant national user groups to get this done. And to get what done? Okay, so PMP is recommended to still be a depth of precipitation for a particular duration, location, and areal extent. But instead of a deterministic single quantity that should never be surpassed, the recommendation is to change the definition to an amount that has an extremely low annual probability of being exceeded for a specified climate period. So that starts to bring in some of the future climate periods as well. But we'll pluck out the real meaningful parts of this in a second. The other big shift that is a little bit separate from the definition, but underpins the entire long-term vision is that the recommendation is that NOAA should adopt a model-based approach to PMP estimation. And so to get there, you need lots and lots of multi-model large ensemble, so lots and lots of very high resolution model-based output in order to be able to construct adequate probability distributions of these extreme precipitation amounts. Okay, so just at the outset, just with these two recommendations, the National Academies is recommending some things that are pretty big. A shift from deterministic to probabilistic, a shift from something that's always been completely observations-based to something that is completely model-based, taking stationary to non-stationary, and now accounting for climate change, which of course was never done with previous PMP guidance. We appreciate that is a lot of change, and so that is why we're doing things in parallel, in lockstep with talking to partners, talking to users, while we push forward a lot of different options within our research portfolio. Something else that I think has been apparent that is useful to clarify now is I think that when a lot of folks originally read or heard about the recommendations from the National Academy's report, they heard kind of, oh, a new definition, and asked, is this the new definition? And the answer to that is no. We can't even get to a new definition until we have sort of completed that entire long-term set of recommendations. So only when we have achieved what both our sort of user community and scientific community determined to be a fit for purpose data set can that new definition even exist. So going forward, operationally, the definition of PMP is what it always has been. We'll grapple going forward with what new flavors of that could be called. And again, we're working with the various partner and user communities to figure out how to make that piece of it make sense as we within NOAA research try and just get the science as robust as we can. So with that in mind, what is NOAA doing? Again, so Sandra and the Atlas 15 team technically sit in the operational side of NOAA, the Office of Water Prediction, the National Weather Service. I sit in the research side of NOAA. And so within NOAA research, we are kind of populating a diverse portfolio of options that all really get at how do you get this massive amount of data in high resolution that will get us to the long-term vision. There are a number of near-term enhancements and approaches that we could help the user community with in the shorter term that are also called out in the National Academy study. We're going to address those as much as possible, and I'll get into a couple of specifics now. So the near-term enhancements that are called out in the National Academy's report talk about a couple of main categories. One is enhancing storm catalogs by basically doing more with what we've already got. We have past storm data. We have past radar information. We know something about past events, but they've never been, comprehensively combined and have their utility maximized as they could have been. And so that's one sort of class of recommendations. The second is to leverage what we know within our scientific expertise within NOAA to improve some of the pieces of the PMP kind of recipe that they might not be the most reproducible or objective part of the science, but like it or not, they're part of how things are done now, such as storm transposition, moisture maximization, and different ways of transposing parts of historical storm data. So at the National Academies points out that NOAA can help offer expert insight into improving some of those while we work toward the long-term vision. And then the third one is applying model-based adjustment factors that reflect changing precipitation up till this point. And so that's sort of the non-stationarity piece. So we're currently exploring what we can do here. A lot of that really needs to be done in partnership with people who have these needs presently, so that any investments that we do make in it, we know that they're going to actually meet the needs of the users right now. A few example activities is that we're working with the NOAA Office of Water Prediction and the Army Corps of Engineers to start moving ahead with combining historical storm catalog information. I'll call out an effort with our partners at the National Severe Storms Lab in a moment, and then also trying to look at what the NOAA Atlas 15 team is doing with the model-based adjustment factors so that we can provide consistency and continuity where it's applicable, and looking to follow on with some of their work there. I'm just going to give an example of one of the efforts that kind of fall under this umbrella that folks in this community I think may be interested in. So the National Severe Storms Lab within NOAA Research is going to go back in their archives of radar data and provide a new radar reanalysis data set that will cover the years of 2014 to 2023. And that will provide hourly updated quantitative precipitation estimation in a digitized form. So for anyone who has case studies or has to generate their own sets of data or guidelines using precipitation information, you'll have one of the richest, most high resolution data sets on extreme events that have at least happened since 2014. And so there's an opportunity to perhaps extend that going forward and even maybe backward in time. But I think that this is a really exciting, success story coming out of this community that hopefully will serve folks well beyond just, PMP. Okay, and then for the long-term approach, so NOAA got bipartisan infrastructure law support a couple of years ago, and while we commissioned the National Academy study, we were also sort of knowing that we needed to be moving in this direction of high resolution data set generation. And so what we've been doing is making a lot of key hires in this area, purchasing a lot of high performance compute, both sort of the traditional kind and also in the cloud. And we've also been coalition building to really build out our partnerships in areas where maybe we didn't have the expertise that we needed. So in light of doing that for a year or two, we have a number of example activities that we have in progress, and in the interest of time, I will only be able to skim the very surface of them, but just pointing out that we generate a lot of global and regional reanalysis data sets, which you can use sort of in a history, backward looking, understand the weather and climate better traditional way, but also they are increasingly the foundational pieces of AI and machine learning models that you are reading about gaining skill and promise. We are also doing our best to contribute to a broad community of data set generation for high resolution future climate scenarios. So whereas in the past a lot of our climate projection information was done very coarse, which is no good for extreme precipitation, we have the opportunity to take that into a much higher resolution realm, which will offer a ton of new information and insight into extreme precipitation specifically. We're also working across labs with the folks who produce NOAA's state-of-the-art forecast models to produce the next version of a high resolution model, starting with a brand new foundational base, looking at how to maximize the ensemble membership. That just means how many models you can kind of run at one time and get a better probabilistic idea. Looking at how to best assimilate all of the data that NOAA and other places collect. And all of these things are focusing on improving the representation of extreme precipitation. So just one quick picture of one of the things that we're working on. So this is what we sort of affectionately call a Hurricane Harvey surrogate in a future climate. This is a comparison between coarse global climate model output from one of our standard global climate models, and it's being downscaled to be higher resolution. And you can see the difference between amounts here, and you're looking at 30 inches of precipitation in a day, and all of the things that I think broadly in this community we understand come out of higher resolution data sets, and the importance of having that when you're talking about extreme precipitation and really wanting to have confidence in those localized amounts. So this is just one thing that we'll be doing, populating different futures. So in like 30 plus year chunks, different versions of the future in high resolution continuously every day to kind of build out those probability distribution functions that is called for in the National Academy's approach to having all of this be model based. In order to get uncertainty in a place where users can use it, we're going to need a lot of data. And so I just offer this as one example of a place where we're getting started building out and contributing to a community of other experts all digging into this high resolution challenge. Okay, so in conclusion, what's next for the next fiscal year within NOAA, aside from all of the science that I just showed you a little piece of it, but there's a whole portfolio of really exciting science that we are chasing down. But sort of like organizationally, strategically, we also are going to try and formalize a partnership engagement strategy so that our interaction with user groups becomes more predictable. And again, just going back to that whole transparency core value. We'll also be coming up with a modernizing PMP implementation plan to connect the dots between our roadmap and how we actually get to achieve where we need to be in the next 5 to 10 years. Broadly speaking, we'd like to have regular updates every 6 to 12 months, but that kind of falls under the heading of our partnership engagement strategy, so stay tuned. And for anyone who's interested in getting those updates, when they're available, you can go to our PMP webpage right there, and there's an email sign up link on there that you're welcome to access. And with that, I will finish up, and we have a poll question that I think Kevin's going to help me with. Yeah, and then I've got my information there. But yeah, Kevin, I don't know if you want to take over and do the poll question, and I can just talk through that. As you've heard, this National Academy's report recommends that PMP go to this AEP-based definition space. So you also heard from Sandra that NOAA Atlas 15 will still go to the 1 in 1,000 year AEP for all of the reasons that go into why the Atlas products are designed for different use than PMP. However, there is space between this old number or current number of a deterministic upper bound that should never be surpassed and the 1 in 1,000 year event. So the poll question is, if it relates to your work, which statement best describes how your work relates to extreme precipitation risk guidance? And the choices are: my work only really needs up to 1,000 year AEPs, so I'm good with Atlas 14 and 15. B, my work does require that I consider risks beyond the 1 in 1,000 year AEP, but we currently have a way of doing this on our own. We're good. C, I think we probably do need to go beyond the 1 in 1,000 year, but we don't have a way of doing this yet. And D, sort of you're out of like, I don't even know what this looks like, shifting to something from deterministic, as I've known it, to an AEP-based framework. I need the old way. So you can answer those. I'll appreciate kind of getting my finger on the pulse from this particular community. And with that, I'll wrap up and we can, I guess, go to Q&A, Kevin.
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. I appreciate that. So I'm going to leave the poll open and just give people another minute or so to respond. I'll close it down and then we can move along from there. So I'm just going to give people a few extra seconds. Okay, so I close the poll down. We'll move on to Q&A here momentarily. It looks though, a slight majority said A, but definitely significant minorities in all the rest of the answers. So definitely some interesting feedback there. Let me close that down. And then as far as questions go, we've got a lot of good ones. I want to throw out a few caveats. We've had several, great presentations, so lots of information, and that leads to lots of good questions. Hopefully we have time to get to as many as we can. We probably will not be able to answer them all in the time remaining. So just want to caveat that there. Another thing I want to draw your attention to, if you did ask a question in the Q&A, we've had some people answering those questions along the way. So you may have an answer in writing already. So go back and check if you don't hear your question answered. It may have gotten answered in writing there. And then beyond that, just kind of another third caveat. I'm but a humble moderator. Some of the stuff is slightly over my head, so I'm going to try to make sure it's all relevant and everything. But if something doesn't make sense, maybe we can just move on to another question or what have you. But we're going to kind of start at the beginning. I know it's frustrating because we've gone through all of this stuff, but we're going to kind of go back to the TMAC update and ask a few questions related to that, and then we'll kind of work our way through. So, Gabby's asking, how does TMAC anticipate the new recommendations, if they get adopted, will impact the delayed firm updates for many communities across the nation? Will there be a prioritization for communities who are in great need of updates already, or is it too early to tell? So maybe just a good place to kind of reiterate TMAC's role in the whole process.
Yeah, Doug, I'll take a first cut if you want. So was not we did discuss that as part of the TMAC is how that should occur. And in the report, we commented to FEMA they should not delay any ongoing studies for these recommendations. They should go ahead and complete any ongoing studies and then create a transition plan. And there were several recommendations at the end of the report as well, spoke specifically around transition, and that FEMA should develop a rolling transition plan for implementing the recommendations. But it also should be a draft rolling transition plan so to be out there for comment and give people a chance to provide input to FEMA on also as they prioritize and implement these recommendations if they decide to implement them as well. Doug, I don't know if you want to add something there.
No, nothing to add. Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Jeff. Okay. So something we got a lot of questions about, at least a dozen or more kind of variations of. Can you explain or just speak a little bit more about the 95% versus 50% confidence interval? People just wanting to understand that a little bit better, how that works and what that looked like.
Yeah, you want me to take this, Jeff?
Yeah, go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, so right now, there are estimates of uncertainty around the 100-year flood or the 1% annual chance exceedance probability flood. So you can think of a 100-year flood as having different sizes, if you will. So there is no one single 100-year flood. FEMA has mapped the special flood, right? The special flood hazard area. And that has traditionally been the median or average size 100-year flood. And so at present, there are a variety of ways to get the range around 100-year flood sizes. And so the concept that that TMAC is promoting here is to use that 95% confidence limit, which would essentially mean that all 100-year floods at the 95% confidence limit, there's only a 5% chance that you might get hit by a 100-year flood beyond that level. So in other words, if you map the 95% confidence value on the 100-year flood, there's only a small portion of 100-year floods that may reach or extend beyond that. And there's a variety of ways of estimating that. If you have gauge data, the USGS has guidance on how to estimate those uncertainties. If you're doing analysis using regression equations, I know there's also some guidance on how to come up with the range of 100-year flood sizes. If you're doing rainfall runoff models, like we saw today from the presentation from NOAA, there are existing and emerging approaches to estimating boundaries on those rainfall estimates associated with 100-year flood events or 1% AEP floods. So yeah, think of it as the 100-year flood is not really a single thing. It's actually got a variety of different sizes. And what TMAC has recommended is that the 95% confidence value be used for mandatory purchase.
Excellent. Thanks, Doug. I think it was a really good overview. And we did get a few additional, maybe a little more specific or nuanced questions. If we have some outstanding questions just for the group, we'll try to get some answers in writing and then distribute those when we send out certificates in a couple of weeks. But I think that answered pretty much the vast majority of questions we got on that topic. So thank you. John has a good question. He's saying, recognizing the if, when, and how of these changes might or might not come about, in the interim, do you recommend using the complementary approach to higher minimum flood standards that are published in the ASCE 7-22 supplement number 2, flood loads consensus standard, and the updated minimum flood design and construction consensus standard, ASCE 2024? that's set to publish this month. So do you have any thoughts on those recommendations or that approach in the interim here?
John, I'll give my thought. I think is one of the things that as we were developing the recommendations, we were aware of the work that ASCE was doing and felt that the TMAC recommendations, along with the AAC recommendations and a couple other things, were kind of forming a confluence of similar ideas and concepts that FEMA should be looking at as we tried to reduce flood damages and reduce flood risk. So I think we viewed them as being complementary to each other and sort of consistent with each other. So Doug, I don't know if you want to add something there too.
The only thing I would add is sort of a yes to that. I would recommend following the new guidance coming out from ASCE. It's a very consensus-driven process. I think to Jeff, your point, it is in the same direction, which is this median 100-year flood level is not really cutting the mustard. People continue to get confused about why they're seeing damages beyond the floodplain, or even within the floodplain when they've built to standards, why they're seeing damages. And so I would say if you want to eliminate some of that surprise and you want to adopt a higher standard, definitely look at what ASCE is recommending.
Agreed.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Excellent. Thank you both. Brent has a question about Atlas 15. So I think this is potentially for Sandra or maybe Kelly, but Brent's saying, is there a risk in the PPT range models being outdated themselves by the time NOAA Atlas 15 is formally made available and adopted by stakeholders? So, he mentions, maybe 2027 or beyond. And Brent's suggesting, it seems like the global warming threshold probabilities are being updated, annually. So just wondering if by the time that Atlas 15 is formalized, if it's going to be outdated, or how do you account for that? Maybe a better way to phrase this question.
That's a really good question. I think for them, currently in Atlas 15, we are relying on the most recent version of climate models and downscale climate models. And what we're trying to capture is trend out of the data. We are not using global warming models directly in estimates. We are using an adjustment factor. So we're trying to kind of capture the trend. And so we currently, with the bipartisan infrastructural law, we have a funding to update the NOAA Atlas 15. And with that update, it's going to be a snapshot in time. And currently, we don't have a funding to continuously update the precip frequency standard on a regular cadence. So but the idea is that if the funding is available with the new version of the models, the updates will be provided.
Yeah, and I would just echo that the new approaches are much more robust to incorporating ongoing new data sets as they become available. And so they'll continue to be designed that way. But to Sandra's point, it's on one hand, we have legislative language and an authorization to provide updates to both NOAA Atlas 15 and PMP going forward, but it currently lacks appropriation. So the hope is, as users prove that this is a really critical thing to be doing, that we will also gain the support and congressional appropriations to do so within NOAA.
Okay, very good. That was helpful. Thank you very much to you both. Logan has a question. I think this might be back to TMAC, but where did his question go? Sorry, bear with me just a moment. Okay, yeah. So we actually had a couple questions in this vein, but Logan's saying, is there any idea of when the redefinition of SFHA would be formally adopted by the NFIP? to me, it sounded like, the proposed redefinition of SFHA is just that, proposed. But so how would that work? Is it still under review? Is that FEMA's authority to do that, or is it, an act of Congress? Like, how does that work, and where does that stand?
Sure. A really good question. One of the things is as TMAC was working on these recommendations, we felt that would not require an act of Congress. It wouldn't have to go back to statute to do that. There may be need for some rulemaking that would take place, but a lot could be done through policy and guidance. It was our thoughts on it. As far as timing of things, again, it gets back to Doug touched on this at the end, is that these are just recommendations from TMAC. FEMA is not required to act on them. A lot of the recommendations TMAC has done have influenced direction FEMA is doing and things that they're doing currently. So, as being part of TMAC and making the recommendations, we're hopeful that FEMA will take them and implement them, but there's no requirement that FEMA do that, or if they have to do exactly what TMAC says, they can always modify it slightly or change it or do something totally different from what TMAC recommend. Doug?
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that, I also saw another question from Todd regarding the value of 95% confidence. And so to the previous question about is it a recommendation, and Jeff's response, yes, it's a recommendation, but also just emphasizing a little bit of what Jeff said, FEMA might look at this and say, well, we think 95 is too high. We would rather take an 80% confidence interval, or it's too low. We think 98 is better. I mean, they can do all kinds of things with these recommendations. And so, as Jeff noted, the TMAC didn't think that it would require statute change by Congress, but there's not a lawyer on the TMAC. So if you got a group of lawyers together, maybe they would have different thoughts on exactly how this would happen. At a minimum, as Jeff noted, the TMAC thought some federal regulations might need to be promulgated. But again, that would be up to FEMA as to whether they want to pursue this, exactly how, whether or not they would want to change it, and those kinds of things. So,
and I think from a timing standpoint is we noted that this is going to take time, and this is a major change to the program if FEMA implemented the recommendations that TMAC put forth in 2023, and they shouldn't rush to implement it. They should take a time to coordinate with stakeholders, work with stakeholders, get feedback from them on what the implementation looks like. So it's not something that would happen overnight, I don't believe.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Jeff and Doug. That's good perspective on that, for sure. So, we just have a minute or two left. We have a few outstanding questions. We're not going to have time for that, but like I said, we're going to try to get answers in writing, and then we'll distribute those in a couple of weeks. So, to wrap up, we're going to ask you to just kind of rate our event today. So, just quick, what you thought of our training session. While you do that, I'll leave the poll open, but I'm going to move on slide deck wise and just remind everybody, this is eligible for continuing education. If you're a national level CFM, we'll get the credit applied to your records automatically if you stuck with us for the full event today. If you're CFM in an accredited state, don't worry, we're going to be sending out certificates of attendance to everyone too. You can use that to turn into your state chapter and get credit that way. And those of you seeking AICP credit, I'll be sending out the event lookup number when I distribute those certificates of attendance, so you'll be able to get credit. But yeah, just closing comment, just thank you for joining us. Thank you to all our speakers for taking time out of their schedules to share this with us, and to you all as audience members. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy days as well. Give us a couple weeks. We'll be emailing you all the promised follow-up that I've been talking about. If you have any ideas, this is a quarterly webinar series. If you have anything that might be a good fit, you can reach out to Alan. But other than that, thanks again, everybody. Really appreciate it. Have a great rest of your week. Take care.